This episode is about minutes 41 through 45 of The Empire Strikes Back with Samantha Tripp. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, but you can call me Xanthi, and today is all about minutes 41 through 45 of Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Samantha Tripp is back on the show. I think this is her third appearance on the show. And we're going to talk about that section of the film where the Millennium Falcon flies over the crater, Luke lands on Dagobah, and Vader spots the Falcon and wants to go after it. Hey, Sam.
Hello.
It's very good to have you back.
It's very good to be back.
We have some very exciting minutes ahead of us.
Yes,
and,
we do.
Yeah. And Sam has just returned from a John Williams conference of why don't you explain what that was?
Yeah, so it was a three-day conference, about an hour train ride outside of Paris. And it was really amazing. We had Frank Liebman and Emilio Artoo were the two keynote speakers. And there were, I'd say, about 20 or 30 papers total, I think, over those 3 days. Just everything from, John Williams' Star Wars music. We had a paper on his scoring of childhood, papers on his orchestration, a paper on how Alexandre Desplat kind of evokes him in one of his scores. So it was really fascinating. Every aspect of Williams' compositional career and how he's made an impact on film music more generally as well. So it's a really good, amazing 3-day conference.
I so wish I had been there. And also I'll say that guest from 2 weeks ago, Connor Power, was also at that conference. Mm-hmm. So I guess we'll probably be seeing a lot of people on the show this season who happen to go to that conference because, well, yep. I mean, the interests clearly align.
Yeah, I think there will be some sort of publication, or I think they also recorded all the talks, so those might be available at some point as well. So,
oh my gosh. Okay, well, if I find out about that, listeners, I will definitely share with you if you want to see presentations, papers about John Williams. I do, for sure. Anyway, okay, Empire Strikes Back, minutes 41 through 45. We're kind of finishing, we're just finishing the very tail end of the Asteroid Field cue. Mm-hmm. And let me just play the beginning of the minutes to jog everyone's memory. Well, we talked about the Asteroid Field cue in the last episode, but this is like the very tail end where you'll hear.
Oh, this is suicide.
Han and Leia.
Good to go.
There. That looks pretty good.
That looks pretty good.
Yeah. It'll do nice.
Excuse me, ma'am, but where are we going?
Oh, that little flurry. And so, of course, they're going over the asteroid. Or, the crater.
I know what you're doing.
Yeah, me too.
This is the Semitonal Slip, which Frank Liebman in his catalog lists it as an incidental motif. Okay, we'll go over all of that again in a second. Okay, you missed most of the Asteroid Field, but since you do have the tail end of it, is there anything you just want to say about that cue?
I mean, there's a lot to say about that cue.
I know.
Great Piccolo part.
Oh,
it's the first thing that comes to mind.
Since you play flute, and I'm assuming piccolo as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I've seen the concert version a few times now.
How do you feel about the concert version? We talked about it last week, and that episode hasn't come out yet, so you don't know what we talked about. But what do you think of the concert version?
I think it's it's not my favorite concert arrangement, I think, of
Same.
Star Wars music. It's decent. It definitely is you can hear him kind of forcing it to be expanded from what it is in the film. I think there's one moment in particular, if I remember correctly, that it kind of almost goes back to the beginning.
Yes.
and starts just repeating. And that kind of seems a little forced to me.
I agree.
The ending's very different from what we hear in the film.
In the beginning.
On several levels. In the beginning, too, there's no... Yeah, it just goes right into the kind of exciting chase music instead of starting with the Imperial March.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah, it's one of those things that, like, when you hear it live, it's, like, really exhilarating and fun and exciting, just kind of primarily based on how fast it is and how many notes the musicians are playing and the fact that you have 3 piccolos going at once.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, when you, like, kind of stop and think about it after you've heard it, you realize, like, okay, it's definitely not his best concert arrangement. But it has, like, one of those, like, cutesy John Williams endings. So
say more. What's a cutesy John Williams
ending?
Yeah,
so he
we'll
kind
play
of...
it. I'll play it, too, so people can hear.
Yeah, so, like, kind of after the first maybe 3 or 4 measures of today's minutes, it's completely different from what we hear in the film. And it kind of goes and repeats some of the material from the cue. And then the texture kind of completely drops out. And it's just these little, I think, scalar passages in the flute and oboe, maybe? And then it keeps going a little bit with the violins. And then there's, like, a big chord. And then just a little tiny bass and cello pizzicato at the end. So.
Let's listen to that, actually. Okay, we're listening to, like, the last 40 seconds of the concert arrangement. Yeah. 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 It's not my favorite, but oh no, well, this is the beginning. It's just playing on repeat. But yeah, it starts like this, kind of getting more immediately into the Asteroid Field. And yeah, I mean, we don't have to belabor the point, but I think this is one of those cues where the key change, like the new chord progressions that are added to it, distract me because I'm so used to the other, like the film version. And also I feel like the slower tempo also kind of makes it less exciting. That said, if it were played in concert...
It depends on the conductor for the because the conductor I've heard conduct it at least once, if not twice, took it very fast.
Oh, really? Okay.
So he took it like the speed that it generally is in the film.
Okay. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess we've kind of
lukewarm about it. Yeah, there's just like the two like kind of jarring moments, or that one moment where it kind of goes back to the beginning essentially, and then at the end where suddenly it's different and there's no Han and Leia theme. Like that's always even more jarring, I think, for me, just because I'm expecting Han and Leia's theme to come in there and then it doesn't. But yeah.
Okay, that's interesting because I bet he cut that out because he was like, well, that's kind of a specific thing that I put in for the film reasons. Yeah. And if I'm doing the concert suite or like the concert arrangement, I can just keep it strictly Asteroid Field and not worry about doing the Imperial March at the beginning and not worry about doing the Han and Leia thing at the end. But I'm also used to it. And we'll hear it because that's part of our minutes right now. It's kind of like the denouement of the Asteroid Field cue as we know it. And so I'll play it right now again, even though we just heard it. Let's see. So right here. We're so used to this being at the end.
That looks pretty good.
That looks pretty good.
Yeah. It'll do nice.
Excuse me, ma'am, but where are we going?
I'm trying to keep talking over it so I don't get it pulled for another copyright thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Smart.
So the bots hear additional audio instead of just the film audio. Anyway, yeah, listeners, I'm curious. Let me know in like comments or whatnot if you feel that at the Han and Leia theme at the end of Asteroid Field, if you feel like it really belongs to Asteroid Field, as you know it personally, because it certainly belongs to the track, the Asteroid Field on the soundtrack, and I think it is even part of like the cue, technically speaking, but it is not part of the Asteroid Field motif or whatever, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah,
And same question with the
I feel
Imperial
like-
March at the beginning.
I feel like with the going into Han and Leia theme, I think he does it very naturally. So like, you hear the music and you kind of expect it to come. Although he does change some of the notes in the measure before where you think Han and Leia should come in the concert arrangement. He changes some of the notes. He adds some scalar runs in the last beat leading to the next measure. So like, it's not exactly the same. And I think that might be to kind of help prepare you for different music.
Yeah.
But I don't know, to me it's always still a bit jarring.
Well, okay. Since I don't even know, okay, I'll mention this now because it is part of these minutes. And the Asteroid Field, of course, is like the cover that I did for this season on Star Wars Music Minute, like the intro and outro music that you hear. And one of my big questions, like something that took me a really long time to figure out what I was going to do. I had to really think about how I was going to handle the ending. Because I mean, I just did, like, I didn't want to end it with the Han and Leia thing because it's like a very long ending. And, you know, for a podcast, like, it needs to be kind of a short ending and kind of a firm ending. And something that I realized was, I mean, I feel like if you just resolve okay, let me backtrack. Okay, I'm going to play the end of the Asteroid Field, the film version, and I'll tell you the part where I just cut off and where the chord does resolve if you just finish it. If you just finish it off. Okay, I didn't go back far enough. Okay. So here's where the last theme comes in. If you just end right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I did. I was like, even though I like, okay, I'm going to play it again. See, it comes down. Yeah. So I just had to cut it off right there and like, yeah. I'll play that for people so you can hear what I am talking about in the context of this other arrangement, since I don't know, I think it can be hard to hear the connection, I guess, sometimes. So, all right. We're almost there. So here's where I started before. And you'll hear where I just cut off. And that's where it would go. Dee, dee, dee. Whatever. Dee, 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 dee. But yeah. So like it does resolve if you want it to. But it's interesting that still, even in his concert suite, John Williams didn't do that.
Yeah, he added this kind of coda essentially to
which
the
is a very
piece.
John Williams. Yeah, you were right.
Yeah.
Like that is a very John Williamsy thing to do. How he did it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the end of the Asteroid Field. I will point out, I think, okay, it was Dominic Sewell a few episodes ago who told me about the word. He uses the word filigree a lot.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's like a British thing or no. He told me that someone else. He heard someone else say that word, say it, but he often would mention it in the context of flutes. So let me just run that by you. Okay, it's before that. I'll tell you where the filigree is. That. Yeah, like kind of like a very fast thingy.
Yeah,
Filigree.
very John Williams-y thing to do too. There's lots of little flute runs all over the place in pretty much every single one of his scores that involves flutes. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
it makes it very difficult to play. Having played some of his music, you kind of just learn to fake it. Just wiggle your fingers a bit and hope for the best.
So
kind
is
of
that a
my
place where you would fake it?
Oh yeah, for sure. I would definitely like that would definitely be okay. What note does it start on? What note does it end on?
That's
Make
really
something
funny.
up in the middle.
Okay, I'll tell you a place where I would fake it in a second. Okay, because after the filigree, we have these artificial harmonics, and I will show you how those are played in a second. Right here, coming up.
Mhm.
So those really high-pitched, scratchy sounding, dee 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 dee. Those are
Mhm.
artificial harmonics played on violins. And I feel like, did we talk about this? I feel like I talked about this on an episode with you specifically. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. Okay. I will remind people what an artificial harmonic is. Well, first of all, or at least how to play it. So the difference between a natural harmonic and an artificial harmonic is that a natural harmonic only requires a string player to lightly tap on this. It's probably okay. Let me backtrack. Okay. If you were to divide the violin string exactly in half and just play the midpoint, you would get what's called a natural harmonic. And if you would divide that in half, you get a natural harmonic, etc. You can just like sort of divide things up, you can do some ratio stuff and find natural harmonics, and I'll play you one. You see how like resonant it is? So hearing so many overtones. Okay, I'm showing the camera really close. You'll see that I'm not even fully fingering the note. Like I'm not pressing my finger down all the way on the fingerboard. I'm just tapping it. Hovering. So that's a natural harmonic. An artificial harmonic is you can sort of artificially create that circumstance by fingering one note and then just lightly tapping a fourth above it. So for these, where it's supposed to sound like the way that you would play that in artificial harmonics is I would actually be fingering these notes, but I would tap my finger a fourth above it. So yeah. So that's an artificial harmonic. And they're useful when, like, natural harmonics sound the most resonant and cool, but you can't find a natural harmonic on every pitch that you might want to use. Mm-hmm. So for something like this, where it's like a lot of notes and it's supposed to be sort of anything where you want to control the pitches, you'll have to use artificial harmonics. Yeah,
I think it actually like works really well. Like I don't think the natural harmonic sound would necessarily work as well for this particular cue, because I think the kind of more transparent sound of the artificial harmonic is really what Williams was going for in this particular moment, where there's like this uncertainty and Han's like, oh, I hope I know what I'm doing, and they don't really, like, they're kind of in a dire circumstance right now, so like that kind of transparent sound creates this bit of uncertainty or anxiety that I think works really well.
I actually agree. Like natural harmonics they're so resonant that they have a way of really sticking out and sort of demanding attention, and they would stick out like a sore thumb, I feel, here, and be too loud, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. All right.
So interesting that strings have both the natural and the artificial harmonics, because flute we're limited to just playing harmonics.
And they're all natural harmonics.
Yeah, you just overblow.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you finger a lower note. Actually, I can demonstrate. Let's see.
Ooh.
I came prepared today.
Yes.
So see what? I'll just do it on a D. So you start with I don't know if you can really see, but it's low D fingering. So basically all the fingers but the two pinkies are down. So that's the kind of the fundamental, and then you just overblow it and you get the whole overtone series. And you can go higher if you are more in shape than I currently am. But
that's cool. And so you can hear the glassy sound, the glassy tone, and you can't vibrate on those notes, right?
You can. It's easier to not. And if I were playing one of those upper harmonics, I would probably not play the low D. I would play a different fundamental to get that note, just to make it a little more stable, because the less distance you're traveling harmonically between the fundamental and the harmonic you're playing, the easier it is to kind of control the pitch and be able to do vibrato and all of that stuff. But it takes a lot of practice, and I've not been practicing much recently. So the doing vibrato on the harmonics is a skill that can be developed. So
yeah. So you're saying you would vibrate normally the fundamental, or wait, can you explain that again?
So you would,
or can you explain what a fundamental is?
Yeah. So a fundamental is just the pitch you're fingering that you're then overblowing, and this all comes out of the harmonic series, and all of that physics stuff that I learned about in high school and then promptly forgot. But so you kind of for me, I find it easier if the distance between the fundamental and the harmonic is shorter, then it's easier for me to do the vibrato. So if I'm trying to figure out what pitch I'd be getting with a D, so it's an octave and then a fifth, which would be, so the high D, which would be the third, I think. So you get the first, that's the fundamental, then you overblow, you get the D an octave above, and then you get the fifth, which would be an A. And then you get 2 octaves above the fundamental. But that,
and all you're doing, you're keeping your finger down, and all you're doing is altering how hard you're blowing.
Yep. And the airspeed too. Quicker airspeed to make it jump. But those upper notes you can actually get with other harmonics where you're fingering a higher pitch. If that makes any sense. So
the higher you finger your pitch, the higher harmonic you can get.
Yes, kind of.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this, so that's the highest note I just played, but with the actual fingering. So you can kind of hear the difference in timbre of those two notes.
For sure.
But let's see if I can make a G. So you can get the same harmonic with a different fundamental. So this is the G fingering. And then this is the D fingering. And then this is the real fingering.
It's super subtle difference, or at least over video chat, but
it's definitely more noticeable in person.
And it would probably be more noticeable if you were using vibrato on the natural note, on the normal note.
Yeah, but it's easier for when I'm fingering the G versus the low D to be able to put any sort of vibrato on the note to change, the intonation of the note. Just it's a lot more stable, I guess, if you're using a fundamental that's closer to the upper pitch. But
That makes sense. Like on the violin, it would be like, well, this would be like the normal D on the A string. And I can hit the harmonic. It sounds completely different. And then I think I can also go, I can also hit it right here on the G string. So it's kind of similar. I can hit that on the G string, on the D string, or on the D string. And the last one wasn't a harmonic. That's why it sounded more of a focused tone. So there are many ways to employ harmonics, like in music, in a score or whatnot.
And then there's sometimes where the musicians will just decide to do them anyway, because at least on flute, if you have a really fast high passage, it's hard to kind of use all your fingers. So you just kind of play harmonics, and then you can just use your left hand. So like that's the one way that we kind of fake it.
Violinists do the exact same thing, for sure. And also do it for like expressive purposes, like as a choice, especially like in solo work or whatever. To hit a note as a harmonic, especially if you're like reaching the top of something. I don't know. It can be fun. Fun to do that. As long as as long as you know that you're hitting the right note, which you would. And I would say probably the most famous example of artificial harmonics in string music. Let me see if I can find something on YouTube. But I'm pretty sure. No, Bartok would be in public domain. Yeah. Okay, so let me just show you what this looks like. This is from Bartok's Romanian folk dances. I'm gonna actually just drop a picture right in there, and it looks like the whole piece is in fourths, but it's not. The whole piece is in artificial harmonics, and you can, if you zoom in, I know it's like a kind of a grainy old score, but if you zoom in, like you'll see that the bottom of each fourth, is a solid note head, and then above it is sort of like a clear diamond head. And the way that, like, if I just play from the beginning, okay, 1, 2, from bar 4, because the first 3 bars is actually what the piano part is. Okay, let's see if I can. Okay, I'll try to also make sure that my violin can show. Okay, sorry, I'm going to cover you for just a second. Okay, so my fundamental, or the fingered part, the part that's all the way fingered, is the bottom. I didn't practice this, but I would actually hit a fourth above. See? The whole thing is artificial harmonics. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to hear that piece. But yeah, that's what's happening in the Asteroid Field here. It's a very interesting texture.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's kind of I think for all of the 5 minutes that we're looking at today, I think the most kind of interesting, salient feature for me was just his playing around with timbre. And especially like once we get to the Dagobah stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Just some of the combinations of sounds that he uses, or him and his orchestrators. I don't know. I know he does a lot of the orchestration work himself, but I'm sure some of it was probably tweaked a little by the orchestrators. But just his very interesting use of orchestral timbre to kind of create these effects.
Well, now I'm curious what you're going to say. I know that you took 10 pages of notes. Is what you told me. So,
yes, I
did. So we might as well get into that. Okay, so where we left off. Oh yeah, the last thing that I was mentioning was the semitonal slip, which is. This one, dee dee dee. And of course, that is what is in Frank's catalog. And the semitonal, or a semitone, I guess, in non-US lingo is a half step. So it's like a slipping down a half step. Whatever. That was the wrong notes, but that's fine. That's a semitone. Yeah, let me see if he has...
It actually happens, I think, really subtly at the end of the next cue, the one that we're going to talk about next. There's a little semitonal thing that you can't... I don't know if it's actually in the film, because I can't really hear it in the film, but in the soundtrack, for sure.
Oh.
And then I saw the live to picture performance at Tanglewood over the summer, and I definitely heard it there as well. So I don't know if it's just mixed down way more in the film itself, but yeah.
Okay, here we have, it's number 28. I don't remember why I circled it, but okay. Yeah. Dee. And he writes, I love his like little descriptions. That's like the main reason yeah. Okay. Repeated semitonal dipping gesture, harmonized in parallel major thirds. Okay. Wait, no. Is that right? Wait, what do you mean parallel major thirds? Okay. Ugh, now we have to hear it again, just so we can understand what he meant. Oh, of course. Silly me. It's a minor major third below, of course. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, where were we? Okay. Harmonized in parallel major thirds, hexatonic implications, prefigured in string counterpoint to force theme in 4M1/2. Okay, what does that mean? Prefigured in string counterpoint. Oh, okay, the string count. Oh, I see. Okay, I get it. Okay. The string counterpoint in 4M1/2. Which one is that? Okay, 4M1. Okay, 4M1 is Luke's first crush. And 4M2 is the Rebels escape again. Okay, so this is Hoth stuff. Okay. Heard prominently in R4P3, which means 4M3. Gosh, I should have vetted this explanation first. I mean, vetted my own understanding of it. So 4M, that's Asteroid Field. Oh, yeah, of course. Okay, yeah. Okay, I guess this is a good time to explain to listeners that R4P3 is the same thing as 4M3. It's just like a different letters. I guess R means real, P means, what does P mean?
I think it's part.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So yeah, that's kind of like the old way of writing it out because of literal film reels. But yeah, the numbers are what matters. 4 and 3. Okay. Anyway, we'll have more of that in the rest of the film. So look forward to that, to the semitonal slip. And now we are in the inside of the giant asteroid crater, or let me see if I can pull up a picture. I'm sure I'd have a picture. And let's see. Oh yeah, it's good stuff. Well, this is where we've gone into. And let's see, the screenplay says, the Falcon races down into the crater. The walls are barely visible as the ship speeds through the tunnel-like opening. A small cave appears on one side of the crater and the Falcon turns, slows, and scoots into it. And it's just a quick shot because then we actually go straight to Dagobah, where there is, Jeremy told me this yesterday, I think it's called, no, this isn't it, never mind. But it's the end of the Asteroid Field cue spills over into the into the transition to Dagobah. So as we're settling into Dagobah, we hear the end of that cue. So here we see Artoo in the mist, the dark bog, swamp. I don't know what the difference between a bog and a swamp is, to be honest.
I don't know either.
Well, Dagobah seems to have the word bog in it, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say that those are related. Yeah, and then there's no music to start.
I think it's about like 45 seconds somewhere in there.
Yeah, and yet there is a lot of sound, and it's like it's let's get into it. Okay, so now we're hearing Artoo and Luke.
Dagobah.
No, I'm not going to change my mind about this.
So
I'm
yeah,
not picking up any cities or technology.
well they're about
Massive life
they're about to
form
do their
meetings, though.
crash.
There's something alive down there.
There's that steady beeping in the background.
I'm sure it's perfectly safe for droids. I know.
Shout out to those R2 sounds.
I can't
Wow.
see a thing. Just hang on. I'm gonna start the landing cycle.
Okay, the screenplay says here, the blast of the retro rockets is deafening, ascending in pitch, drowning out R2's electronic squeals. Suddenly there's a cracking sound, as if limbs are being broken off trees, and then a tremendous jolt as the spacecraft stops. Luke pulls a switch and his canopy pops open. And now we start 5M1 crash landing. Thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, it's very different than a lot of the kind of the music that we'd expect from Star Wars. It's much more experimental, very atonal. There's no tonal center to speak of. Very chromatic. Moments where it's borderline 12 tone, but not like it's using all 12 of the pitches, but it's not serialism. What else? Very fascinating uses of different techniques on instruments. There's very beginning of the cue, there's muted trombones that are sliding between half steps. And those are combined with, I think, a tuba and some low winds, I think bass clarinet, bassoon, contrabassoon, that are kind of emphasizing the actual notes but not doing the sliding. But the main timbre is the trombone muted. And it's a very interesting mute, too. It's not like kind of, I think it's supposed to be a metal mute specifically, and I think in the score it specifies the type of mute to use, but it's very, I don't even know how to describe it. Like the tone of a muted trombone is very unique and interesting.
I guess we can listen to it.
Yeah.
Can you just, do flutes have mutes?
No, we do not.
Interesting. Huh.
I don't think any winds do.
Huh.
If I think about it. Because I don't know how you'd go about doing a mute
Yeah, me neither.
on a wind instrument.
Yeah. Unless you just sort of clamped something on it, which would kind of stop it from resonating so much.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, with all the COVID stuff the past few years, we've had various forms of PPE for wind instruments.
Oh.
Not all schools used them, but Tufts was like, we're using them. So, like, we started with these ridiculous bags that
you'd like put on
around
the
your
flute?
Yeah. So, like, they'd go basically up the whole body and stop, like, here. And then they had these little holes that you'd stick your hands into to be able to, like, actually play.
What?
And then you had a mask, too. But, like, it didn't affect the sound at all.
What?
So, yeah, like the only problem I was having, it was a little tiny bit muted, but not really, not anything significant. The problem I was having is I had to do some tongue thrusts where you have to like turn the flute in and then turn it back out once you're done with them. And I kept having keys getting snagged on the bag. But other than that, it really didn't affect my playing, other than tuning was a pain. And then having to get the flute into the mask was a pain. But then, thankfully, that only lasted a few months. And then we got these little, like, things that just went on the end of the flute. And they had, like, a little, like, rubber bandy thing to keep it on the flute. And it just stopped the air from, like, the air particles from coming out the end or whatever. But again, that had absolutely no effect on the sound.
That's very surprising to me.
Because the sound's also coming out of the holes. And, like, that's how the pitches are changing, is because you put down keys and it's resonating a certain length of the tubing. So, yeah, I don't think a mute would really work on a wind instrument at all if the bags didn't impact it.
That's very interesting. Okay, I think most people know the sound of a muted trumpet, and I guess a trombone would be sort of similar in that you put it in the bell, like you put it in the part that sticks out, like the part that you would think, the hole at the big hole at the end of it. I'm just going to put up an image of a trombone mute, like a typical aluminum trombone mute.
Mm-hmm.
You would literally stick that in, just the shape of it, imagine it rotated, that way. And a violin mute would be like, there are many different kinds, but the point is that you would put it on the bridge. You'd put it on the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
You can just put like a little rubber thing, put it on the bridge, just like that. If you wanted to be super hardcore, you could get a practice mute, which is like a big, heavy metal, like clamp that you put on the bridge. And I used to use this a lot when I was growing up because I would like, I will have procrastinated on practicing, and then I'd have like a lesson the next day, and I'd be like, okay, I have to learn this entire piece. So I'd be like up all night with my practice mute, and like, listen how muted it is. Does a pretty good job.
I wish we had practice mutes for flute. That would have solved so many issues for me growing up.
I know. I can't
I was
believe
like, oh no, it's 9 p.m. I can't practice anymore.
Oh, 9 p.m. Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
You need it for 3 a.m.
I had a
for sure.
different, I think that might have been the Piccolo limit. I think there was a difference in time with how late I could play Piccolo versus flute, because the Piccolo is much louder
Shriller.
and much more piercing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That might have been the Piccolo time, and then I think the flute time was like closer to 10 or 10:30 or something.
That's really funny. Yeah. Just on that alone, I couldn't play flute because of that alone. Okay, so let's hear the beginning of, what's it called? Crash. It's, what on the soundtrack is this track called? Okay, wait.
I can't remember.
Let's see. Crash. I have it written down somewhere. Well, while I find that, we'll just play it from the film. It's about... Okay, so listen for those muted trombones. Arrival on Dagobah is what it's called. Those. What an opening that was.
Oh yeah.
The muted
There's also
trombones really
the
do
string
sound strange.
Glissandos, like, as well under the trombones, that also create this kind of eerie, otherworldly type of sound as well. Yeah,
there's like glissandi happening on multiple levels, and so now that I know it's called Arrival on Dagobah, you can hear it. So what I'm hearing there is glissandi in the trombones. And then also very slow glissandi in the strings, kind of doing like a very creepy sort of. And glissando just means gliding, and which is why I'm sort of gliding. What a good explanation. Yeah, it's basically like sliding/gliding through the tones without like stopping to finger them each individually.
Yeah, and I think on the score, it doesn't even have it has like the first note for the strings. And then it just has kind of lines going up and down. And it doesn't even tell you like what should be your lowest note, what should be your highest note. So everyone's kind of on their own on that as well. So it's, the people sitting next to each other aren't playing the same pitch at the same time. And so it creates this kind of atmospheric, creepy sound.
Yeah. I'm going to show a little bit of what that looks like, where there's like starting pitches, but then it's like unspecified because, like we were talking about, like in the Hoth episodes earlier in the season, the effect is like the gliding effect, the high pitched, gliding, pianissimo, eerie thing is more what's important here. And I like the layers. I like the different instruments doing the glissando or, portamento in different ways, where the trombone is obviously has more of an obvious pitch to it, but it's like the gliding happens between those notes. It's very... We have some passing on of that solo. A little minor Luke theme. A little magical moment with glockenspiel, vibraphone, tremolos. Interesting harmony there. I'll stop right there for now. So what I'm noticing is, well, first of all, the clarinet thing that moves to the oboe. It's like
kind of prepares the way for more the theme, because like you go from this very unmelodic, atmospheric thing to something that's melodic. It has like a shape to it. It has actual notes, but it's not anything memorable, really. Melodically.
It's hard to hum.
Yeah. And then it goes from there. Like, it kind of paves the way for then the minor Luke theme to come in.
Yeah.
I think it kind of is that bridge between the atmospheric at the beginning and then an actual theme happening.
Yeah, so it doesn't go from like 0 to 100. So it doesn't go from like really random to all of a sudden a clear theme. It kind of goes from really random to a clear gesture and then a clear theme. And it's kind of going like, well, the notes are like, there's too many notes. Okay. And if I were to write those out in the same octave, it would be like, it would cover A flat, A, B flat, B, C, C sharp. So that it's all in this very tight chromatic space. And then the oboe. We have to see these semitonal, this half step falling thing. That just made me all of a sudden in my head, like the memory of that just right now when I did that, I went in my head, D, 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 D. Do you know what that is? Just like the orchestra person in me just was like, are we playing Tales of Hoffman? Oh my gosh, that was really funny. Yeah, okay.
I've definitely done that before, where I've like extracted like a little bit of something, and then I'm like, wait a minute, this is the same thing as this like random orchestra piece.
Yeah, that's like me half the time on this show. I'm like, hear me out. This is the beginning of Check 4. Yeah, okay. So this thing is also in, I'm not saying there's a connection at all. I'm just saying for people who are confused about what just happened, it reminds me of this opening to this part in Tales of Hoffman by Rossini. Is that who wrote it?
No. I think it's Offenbach?
Offenbach, you're right. It's Offenbach for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's French. What am I talking about? Tales of Hoffman, and which is like where the can comes from. Okay. Anyway, moving on from that. Maybe I'll put a link in the show notes if I remember to that so you can hear. Okay, so let's see. I wrote, okay, the main theme, where it's the third is flattened
Mhm.
instead of, and we're about to hear that a lot on Dagobah.
Yep.
Yeah, and then the screenplay says the mist-shrouded X-wing fighter is almost invisible in the thick fog. I'll just put this up from my notes so you can. In the thick fog, Luke climbs out onto the long nose of the spacecraft as Artoo pops out of his cubbyhole on the back. The young warrior surveys the fog, which is barely pierced by the ship's landing lights. About all he can make out are some giant twisted trees nearby. Artoo whistles anxiously.
He does that a lot.
He does, and there are so many different flavors of his whistling,
Mhm.
which I think really actually especially stand out on Dagobah. And maybe it's because the music is so sparse here, and also because
Yeah.
Dagobah has this, or like at least this swamp that they landed in, has this like reverb to it.
Mhm.
So like if I just keep playing, or if I play back from the minutes, we can hear some of this awesome Dagobah soundscape. Okay, let's go a little further. Already the whistling is kind of like we're hearing so many creatures in the background. His beeps reverberate.
No, Artoo, you stay put.
And it's panned, that's panned to the right. And of course, the sound of the lake splashing. It's really like, I really appreciate like the sonic, I don't know, picture that they're painting in this new
Yeah.
location.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so different than anything we've heard, I think, in Star Wars as a whole up until this point. Granted, this is only the second film that came out, but like, I think even later films, you don't really hear anything that's quite like this, other than like maybe Episode 6 when they return to Dagobah.
Right.
But
Same
I don't
place.
think we ever get another planet that sounds quite like this one does.
I think you're right. Like, Dagobah is such a specific, I don't know, the swampiness of it is, like, we get a lot of desert places.
Hmm.
We get
That's true.
a lot of, like, city type of places. And we get a lot of places kind of in between. We get some forest places for sure,
Mhm.
which also is, you know, Endor was also a very cool, new type of location. And of course, you know, there's like the main elements, like Mustafar, of course, is very different. But swampy, I don't know, and watery, other than Camino, I guess the closest I can recall to something remotely like Dagobah is maybe when Rey's in the cave on
Yeah.
Octo. But of
Yeah.
course, Octo, the terrain is completely different still. It's not,
Mhm.
definitely not boggy or swampy.
Yeah.
It's just like
and even
in
like
the
the kind
water
of
place.
like the moderately swampy location on Naboo, like it doesn't
So
sound
true.
anything like this.
Yeah. And this is, Dagobah's obviously like it's remote. There's not like a city here. That's the whole point. That's why Yoda is here. So it is really a place, I think somewhere in the screenplay, it's like teeming with life. And that sounds accurate.
Yeah.
Sounds accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just got to the part where Artoo falls into the lake. And listen for the part where the periscope is going to pop out.
Artoo!
It's
Where
funny.
are
There's
you?
pizzicato here.
Artoo!
And you know everything's okay because the droid theme pops back in. I think that's like,
Yeah.
I think the music kind of signals to viewers not to be too worried about R2 here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to be worried about R2 when you hear these pizzicatos in the background, even
Exactly.
before the periscope pops up. Like, the pizzicato just kind of has that, fun, playful association with it, even though they're playing dissonant intervals or whatever. Like, it still kind of has that fun quality to it. So you're like, okay, I'm not too worried. He'll
Yeah.
pop up at some point.
It's like popcorn. Pop, pop.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then, of course, this is the Droids theme.
That way.
And still, this continues the, like, kind of more lighthearted,
Mhm.
It's sort of, stuff with the droids tends to contrast the very heavy stuff that the humans or main characters might be facing, or at least we in the audience might perceive that they are facing, and kind of landing on a strange planet, not knowing where anything is, a bog or whatever. And I think the music and sound are kind of helping keep us in this, like, sort of fantasy. It's, at the end of the day, it's Star Wars. This isn't going to be the part where there's like a tragic death. That's not going to happen here. And the bounciness of it, and even the way that the music kind of stalls for Luke to say his line, like,
You be more careful. R2.
right here.
That way.
That part is just funny to me. Dee-dee. It's like,
Yeah, and R2's little noises as he's just going around in the lake, not a care in the world.
yeah, reminds me of my cat or something. Like, oh, okay, fine. She's just doing her thing. Okay, she's gonna keep squawking. Okay, that's fine. And then we have this very high-pitched clarinet. Well, that was it. It's an E-flat clarinet.
Way.
A nice string line. And notice how the end of that kind of briefly lyrical string thingy sort of passes on this semitonal. I was going to keep saying semi. This half step thing. It passes it on to the bass clarinets, so it goes where the violins come. It's like, sorry. And then the bass clarinets echo that an octave lower. And it kind of transitions it into the next idea. Here, we hear it again. We still have muted brass. And then kind of all hell breaks loose there for a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like the music definitely kind of foreshadows that with like kind of the low grumbling, low winds, cello bass, playing these very fast passages, and then contrasting with that, a variant of the droid theme up in the stratosphere in, I don't know how many piccolos it is in the film itself, because I know there is some moment in the film that has 5 piccolos.
I think that's Battle of Hoth.
I think so too. But like, I'm wondering if he maybe used that a little bit later on, because like there are definitely a couple moments on Dagobah where I'm like, okay, that's minimum 3, maybe 4, could be 5. But here I think it's only 3, and in the live to picture version, it's definitely 3, if I remember correctly from when I saw it over the summer. But playing this like ridiculously high thing in unison, where you're wondering like how are they in tune with each other, because Piccolo does not play in tune up that high.
Oh, I never
and
really
it's-
appreciated that. Let's listen again. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it where we just stopped, basically?
It was just before, like maybe 5 seconds before where we just stopped.
Okay. Oh, here. Oh,
Yeah,
that is very high.
and it's also E flat clarinet, I believe, in
Yeah.
there as well. But like you don't really hear it because the piccolos are just so present because there are multiple of them, and it's very high.
I do hear
and
a little bit of, now that you mention it, I do hear a little bit of pitch variation in the piccolos.
Yeah,
But the thing is, I think this is a really interesting, it's a very smart orchestration choice because I think the E flat clarinet is what kind of smooths it all out and kind of it gives it a baseline tone almost. It's like a much
Yeah,
more straight
yeah.
tone instrument. Let's hear.
yeah.
You be more careful.
Artoo. That way.
Okay. Clearly I went back a little bit too far, but that's fine. Just get ready for those piccolos. Here. Yeah.
Like you can tell it's multiple
You can tell it's multiple because
there's like you can hear the like slight
You can hear
variation in pitch.
exactly. It's like I
Like
wouldn't
you can
listen to
tell
that.
they're not all exactly the same.
Exactly. Like they're not
and it's-
clearly exactly tuning in the exact same way, but it doesn't read to me like someone's making a mistake.
No,
It
it's
just
not
reads
out
to
of
me like
tune.
there's a
It's-
lot
yeah.
of there's a few people.
Yeah, and it's actually very smart to use 3
Definitely.
because 2 piccolos playing in unison, if they're even the slightest bit off, it sounds out of tune. But as soon as you have more than 2, they kind of like somehow even each other out. So even if they're all slightly off, it doesn't sound out of tune. Whereas like if you had 2 piccolos that were slightly off, it would sound out of tune. So it's very smart to have the 3 there instead of saying, oh, let's just have 2.
It's the same with violin. Is like orchestrationally, composingly, you either want to have a solo violin or 3 or more. It's not usually a good idea to put solely 2 players with violin on the same part because there's going to be pitch it's not. You need the third one to like kind of smooth it out.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
think, who was it? In the Score documentary that came out, I want to say 2016, I think it was
Empire
Brian
Strikes Back score documentary. Oh no,
No, it was
the
just like-
score. Oh, I see. I
Yeah,
saw
just-
that, yeah.
of the film score, how film scoring works, history of film score documentary. I think it's Brian Tyler talks about like, that's really why you want a live orchestra is because everyone's going to be slightly off in intonation. And that's what gives it like this real sound. Whereas like if it's just a MIDI or whatever, where you can get the intonation perfect, it doesn't sound real. It doesn't sound human. It sounds, like it is. It's electronic. And I don't know, it just gives it kind of that special quality, I guess.
In fact, that's kind of like my litmus test. It's not even on purpose. I'm not like I'm going to test this score. It's more like if I don't hear, I don't know. It's subtle. I can tell like often. This is the movie, by the way.
Yes, yeah.
If I don't hear slight beating, if I don't hear slight, I don't know. I can just tell. I can just tell sometimes. That said, sample libraries and there are ways, obviously, that you can create that slight variation. It just manually to do it, it's kind of hard to recreate exactly what it's like. Like if something sounds equal temperament, kind of basically like perfectly equal temperament, in a string part especially, or even a wind part, it tips me off that it's maybe not a live orchestra.
Yep.
Anyway, thanks for pointing that out. I didn't appreciate it to that extent.
Yeah, and I think like just the height of the piccolo kind of creates this off-putting feeling where you're like, okay, something's gonna happen.
What do you mean height?
And I think like just the pitch, like
like how high it is, like how high the pitch is. Got it. I'm like, it's a pretty small instrument, actually.
No, like the actual like the pitch, yeah. Because I mean, like, especially when we think about kind of the Empire score as a whole, there's a lot of Piccolo. I didn't fully appreciate how much Piccolo there was until I saw it live, and I was just like, wow, that Piccolo player is getting a workout. But a lot of the really high stuff is relegated to action sequences or moments where there's some sort of danger.
Danger is like often, yeah.
And so like having then the high Piccolo here where the music's all fun and kind of jokey a bit, it kind of signals that, okay, maybe things aren't as
safe
as they seem. And I think, if I remember correctly from watching these 5 minutes, the moment where the camera kind of pans back and shows the creature in the water that's going to take Artoo down, that's when the Piccolo comes in with the droid theme. So I think that kind of helps to create this like, okay, things were fine, but now there might be some danger.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And I think something that always rings off, or I don't know, sets off my danger bells even more is when there's something super high at the same time as something super low.
Mm-hmm.
So the piccolos, like 3 piccolos and an E-flat clarinet. Listeners, I guess, should clarify, the standard clarinet, when we think of clarinet, is called a B-flat clarinet. And an E-flat clarinet is like a higher pitched clarinet. It's smaller. And that's what we're hearing at the same time as the piccolo. Okay, so yeah, so here like the bass clarinet, bassoon thing, it makes it sound uncanny. It makes it sound scary. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm with you there. Okay, let's hear that again. And super low. I guess we already passed the piccolo part. Okay. Yeah. And the muted trombones. And then I really like the string part there and how the texture changes overall. Like you can tell that something in the action has changed just because like the music has changed so much. Like we no longer have the I don't know, this sort of steady pulse. Yeah, the strings take over with this fast line that sounds almost slower than it actually is. Let me get your take on this. When I first heard this, let's scoot forward a little bit. Suddenly, through the thick fog layer, a dark shape appears, moving toward Little Droid. The dark, sinuous bog beast dives beneath the swampy water, making a loud clunk against Artoo's metal hull. So to me, that sounds like almost like. Sorry, kind of played that kind of crappily, but that's okay. It sounds like syncopated eighth notes to me at first listen, like dee 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 dee, and then, but it's actually what it actually is 16th notes. But because the 16th notes are slurred and there's repeated notes, so like 2 16th notes equal an eighth note, like fractions. See, I mean that's exactly how it works. 2 16th notes equals 1 eighth note, and so what's actually happening is like 1 E and 2 E and, but it sounds like anyway, just like the it has this it gives me it feels like something, it's moving forward. It's certainly driving forward. But something about the legato and slurred nature of it makes it feel also sinewy. Like it makes it feel
Yeah.
swampy. I don't know. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would agree actually. Definitely the slurs, I think, are what's doing that. And then in combination with the repeated notes, and like, so if you don't kind of get, I feel like the attack on the repeated notes isn't necessarily for every player like a strong attack. It's kind of a almost like, you know, when you have a slur and you have like either a tenuto or a staccato mark under the slur and you kind of just gently tap it instead of like separated notes that are completely separate. That's what it sounds like to me.
Do you mean like when it's, or do you mean like it could have been
Yeah.
where here it's sort of,
Like it's just a very,
it's allowed to run into, like it's almost purposely
Yeah.
running into each other, running
Mhm.
into itself. Like instead of, yeah.
yeah. And it's just like, I feel like that kind of creates that kind of feeling of it's slower than it actually is.
Yeah, it's like laggy, or it's not even laggy. It's like, well, let's listen to it again. Especially there at the end, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. It almost reminds me of like,
it's like, it's moving forward, but there's something about it that's not moving forward as quickly as others. Maybe, I don't know.
yeah, I'm feeling that. It's like sticky almost. It almost reminds me a little bit of the trombone thing from the beginning, where, because this is kind of mostly moving in half steps also.
Yeah.
So here, how it's like, and it's sticky, so it's like more like, where the trombone, muted trombone, is also going like kind of unclear where the changes are. Yeah, it's kind of a cool way to use that same idea in a completely different context, a completely different instrument and register.
Yeah.
Cool. So we'll keep listening. So that little like motif keeps, oh, my piano turned off. Well, before, or sort of, and also before, nope, don't remember where that was. But the, like there's different ways that this droid theme is being, I don't know, played with.
Yeah, and like when he's under the water, you have this like variant, I think, I want to say it's an E-flat clarinet and bassoon maybe, where there's like this rest added in, and so it sounds like a little more hesitant. It sounds almost like, is it okay? Like, is Artoo going to be okay? Kind of questioning that by just adding like one rest in to that figure.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's kind of, yeah. It's before that, right?
No, it's
it's
after that.
Here.
Yeah.
Rest. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like bringing this like hesitancy into it. Like, yeah.
Totally. Or whatever the note was. Yeah, the rest there,
and then,
definitely.
Yeah, and then also like kind of having it over like this almost cluster chord in the strings too kind of creates that as well.
Yeah, where the strings are sort of just sustaining something. Yeah. Yeah. Wait. Sorry. Rest. That's cool.
Yeah, he definitely does some fun playing around with the droid theme in this scene.
Wait. Excuse me, I need to look up pitch class calculator. Just want to. E flat, 3 3 3. Where have we seen 3 3 before recently? 3 3. Let's see. Oh, in Dagobah. Okay, yeah, it's all over this. Never. Yeah, okay. I've recently started cataloging the pitch set classes that I come across just to make sure, so that when I notice one, I'm not like, oh yeah, and there's this set, because there's so many times where it's like the same set that I may have already done 2 weeks ago or something. And so it's helpful to see where, but I just kind of started cataloging that like last month. So the catalog's not very full yet. So I'm like, oh, there's another reference in my notes, but the reference is from this episode. So, okay. But anyway, that type of thing is still, it's still very, I don't know, it's all over this score, truly. And also I'll say, I won't talk about this much here. We kind of talked about it briefly in episode 6 with Dom Sewell, but the set 3-3, which is it's this. These notes. There are supersets that are related to that, and that just means if you add another note, basically I'll go into it more in a future episode, but that is one of the supersets is 4-3, number 4-3, and that is definitely like in Hoth, it's like in Vader's chamber, it's in a lot of, also on Piccolo, according to my notes. This thing. That's it. It's related to that. Okay. So that's enough about that little thing. Okay. Continue listening. It's like passing to the different instruments.
Little tuba solo.
Yeah, we love a tuba solo.
Oh, no. Are you all right? Come on. You were lucky to get out of there.
Did you hear Artoo's little like cry?
They definitely got very creative with the Archie noises in this movie.
Very creative.
I very much appreciate it.
Very creative. Yeah. It's great. It's this wouldn't have worked if like Luke's droid companion just kind of did the same beep beep every time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of the action that's happening here, see, there's not very much dialogue, which I think is interesting because, well, I guess unless you count the beeps as the dialogue, because most of these minutes are really like a conversation between Luke and Artoo as they experience this new place together. And it also reminds me of Tatooine, where we also have, I mean, when we land on Tatooine, it's 3PO and Artoo. And so again, it's like, they're both droids, but like 3PO is the one that speaks basic. And it's also, I don't know, it has a similar vibe where the music is actually there's no music at first, and then it's pretty sparse. And it's a conversation between one speaking, droid and the beepy Artoo. So it showcases many elements of where we are. So Luke helps Artoo to his feet and begins wiping the mud and roots from his round metal body. Artoo responds with feeble, soggy beeps.
I love that.
I love a soggy beep.
Soggy beep.
Yeah. So
I also love the string part in that moment as well. Like, I don't know what it is about the string part. Like, it's just suddenly like this very like warm, deep sound in the strings.
Oh,
As Luke's kind of picking R2 up. That
okay. Let's
we
hear that
don't
again.
really hear anywhere else in this cue.
Let's hear that again. Actually, let's listen to the cue without the dialogue and stuff. Or, oh, it'll be weird to hear it without R2, but well, let's hear. Anyway, let's see. What's before this?
I think it's right here.
Oh.
And you have that like the low cello.
Right. So this is also okay. It's good that you brought that up because this is also 16th notes, but this does have the articulation. It's going like. And then there's also pizzicato in the bass.
Mm-hmm.
That's a neat orchestration there.
Yeah. And then if you play it a little bit longer.
Okay.
Here.
Piccolo. Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, like it's just like it quiets down, but like the sound is so rich with the strings. Like it's the full string section playing this passage that's like I feel like it's a very common sound in Williams kind of more generally. Like
do you mean like when it warms up?
Yeah, where there's like it's just strings, it's very warm, very rich, full string section type of thing. Like I can think
it's sort of like a homophonic texture, basically.
Yeah. Like it reminds me a lot of I don't know if it's just because they played this in one of the concerts at the conference, but his concert work Essay for Strings uses that sound a lot.
Essay for Strings?
Yeah.
I've never heard
it.
It's
really cool to hear that live. Yeah, it's like it's this very like kind of Barber-esque texture, like kind of adagio.
I was just going to say, was that inspired by Barber?
Probably.
Because Barber, I have definitely played Barber's essays for orchestra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's like this very like kind of adagio for strings-esque sound to it, where it's just the full warm. I don't know. I didn't really know how to describe it, but yeah, it's there. So it's like in this score, it's in that piece that Williams wrote for concert work. But then there's also like a moment in his JFK score that uses kind of that rich string quality. So it's a very Williamsy thing, and not really something you would expect in this particular cue, where everything has been kind of sparse, or when the texture is bigger, it's only for a very short amount of time, and there's little things thrown in here and there, lots of muted brass, and then all of a sudden he just lets it be the strings, and then throws these, I think it's a B-flat clarinet solo, and then piccolo solo over that sound. That kind of creates this really nice moment.
Okay, we must hear that again now. It's before this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go further before this. Okay. Here. The strings make a really good pad for these wind solos because it doesn't really conflict very much timbrally.
Yeah.
The unique qualities of the wind instruments, like the clarinet and then the piccolo, or is that right? Clarinet and then piccolo? Yeah. They really stand out. Plus, the string part's not very active. It's really just, you know. I don't know if these are the right notes, but the second one that really gets to me is no, it's not. They're not the right. It's like moving in fourths and fifths, and for some reason, the second one stands out to me. It's because it's on the D string. And then suddenly, it's a nice transition. So just in the first violins, I guess the first and third of those things are doing a perfect fourth. And the fact that the second one that does the perfect fifth, for some reason, is so Barber-esque to me. So this is A to D is a fourth. F sharp to C sharp is a perfect fifth. And then E to A is another fourth. So the second one is a larger leap. Anyway. And here we've moved to trill. Which is also nicely out of the way. That's good stuff.
Yeah. And then that, like, the last bit of that right before, like, literally like half a second before the Imperial March comes in, it kind of leads into it very well because you have I think bass is going down like a perfect fifth, kind of under the piccolo solo, and repeated once or twice or three times or something. But then the last one is a diminished fifth. So it's a tritone instead of the perfect fifth, with the timpani roll kind of over that. And it just kind of leads so, like, you know something's coming the second you hear that. And then it immediately transitions into the Imperial March and back to the Empire, and you see the Star Destroyer. So it works really well.
Yeah.
Like, Williams knew what he was doing.
No doubt. Let's hear that again. That's a perfect fifth. Okay, let's go further back because you said it happens twice.
Yeah, I think twice.
Yep. Perfect fifth. And here. Yeah,
it's really hard to hear because the timpani kind of takes over the texture there, but
yeah.
Yeah.
But still it is felt. It is hard to hear, but I think even before we get to that diminished interval, which is so a perfect fifth would have been this. So this is a tritone, and so it goes perfect fifth, tritone. I think even the movement from the perfect, like, it starts on an F before, and then it starts on a D flat.
Yeah.
So even it kind of foreshadows like Vader's theme, doesn't it? Sort of.
Yep.
It falls down at major third. Yeah. And then, of course, the Imperial March comes in. This is Vader's Star Destroyer. We see his little egg chamber, which I don't know why it amuses me so much. I
mean, I always thought it was hilarious as a kid.
Okay, good.
So it's not just you.
It is very funny that he has this egg chamber. It looks like, I don't know, it looks like a decoration that you might buy somewhere. Yeah. And Admiral Piett walks in on him, putting his helmet on. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a picture of the egg, but I know I showed this on a previous episode because also couldn't help talking about it then either. It's a good egg for sure. It's a very good egg. And I don't know, it gives like the jaggedness, the pointiness of it is so Vader. It's also is so Kylo Ren. Like I feel like Kylo would have really liked that chamber for sure. Like I think he'd be all about it. I think he'd be like, yeah, let's decorate with really harsh edges just because we should. Yeah.
Yeah.
We love the egg chamber. Okay. And Admiral Piett sees his helmet coming on, which of course gives us our first canonical glimpse of Vader's bald, sort of scarred, very pale back of head. And I'm curious for first-time viewers if that symbolized anything, what you thought of that, because we now know that Vader needed his suit to survive, and I'm curious if it's just the back of his head. You can't really see if it's like that he's scarred or has trouble breathing or whatever. You can't really see the extent to his injuries, and so I bet like at this time, maybe people thought he just wears it to be scary or whatever. And I don't think this scene would necessarily change that, but maybe for some people it would. I don't know. I guess you do see like a respirator tube as well. But yeah, I'm just curious. Like he could just be putting on his scary gear to some people.
Yeah. I think the problem with me is like I've known Star Wars for so long. I don't remember seeing Star Wars for the first time.
Me too. That's also my problem.
So like I can't that is a very interesting thought because like for people who were around when the films were coming out originally or who for some reason have managed to avoid all spoilers associated with Star Wars and then they see that for the first time. Yeah.
This is the egg chamber, by the way. It's like it looks like the architecture of their like ships and stuff too.
Yeah, yeah. It's very Empire-esque architecture for sure.
It like geometric. It's very Empire, but like with flair. It seems.
It's Darth Vader being a drama queen.
It really is, which is why I think Kylo would have liked it as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the screenplay says Darth Vader, his back turned, is silhouetted in the gloom on the far side of the chamber. A black insect-like droid attends him. Among the various apparatuses surrounding them, a respirator tube now retracts from Vader's uncovered head. The head is bald with a mass of ugly scar tissue covering it. The black droid then lowers the mask and helmet onto Vader's head. When it is in place, the Dark Lord turns to face Piett. And then there's a descending line as Vader's helmet descends. And so I'll play that. Oh yeah, did you note that as well?
I did, yes.
Yes, nice. Okay. Here. It's just that little. Is that Piccolo again?
Yeah, I think so.
It's not uncommon in a film score to do that. Sort of when something's moving a certain direction, have a line move that direction as well.
And it draws your eyes to it for sure.
Yeah. And then I guess we do hear hydraulics and breathing stuff.
Yes, Admiral.
Our ships have sighted the Millennium Falcon Lord, but it is...
And just that like woodwind stinger, I guess, to underscore the dialogue without getting too in the way.
Mm-hmm.
entered an asteroid field and we cannot risk...
Asteroids do not concern me.
The music's not very active.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting, like this whole sequence kind of going from Vader to Piett, you can hear it in the music. It's like, I mean, you get the big Imperial March when you see the Star Destroyer, but then as you see Piett kind of walking in, it's kind of a rhythmic variant of the ostinato from the Imperial March. But it's kind of, it's less brassy. It's, I think, exclusively strings, maybe with some brass in there, but mostly strings dominated. Then you have like the bit with the helmet, which is more kind of almost reminiscent of the Dagobah music, where it's good. It's atonal. It's kind of just little bits and pieces here and there. You can never kind of get your fingers on it. But then you get full Vader. You get the Imperial March again. Then Piett goes to talk, and the texture suddenly is back quiet. Then when Vader talks again, the brass comes back in. So like it's Williams is kind of underscoring like who's
their power dynamic.
Yeah, like who's the main one you see and are supposed to be paying attention to in the particular moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is Vader. And that's what you mean, the string thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is sort of doing the like... which is like kind of the rhythm of the ostinato. Yeah. There's the helmet going on. The way the tube kind of sucks at the end. And of course, the theme.
Our ships have sighted the Millennium Falcon Lord, but it has entered an asteroid
it's sort of
field
quiet
we
again.
cannot risk.
Asteroids do not concern me, Admiral. I want that ship.
And brass
Yes,
for Vader. Yeah, great point. Sorry, it started repeating from the beginning of the minutes, but that's the end of the minutes. Yeah, I totally
And I think that
agree.
like the little woodwind thing, I could be wrong on this, but to me it sounds like it's a reversal of the Imperial March chords. So you have like kind of the tonic going to the flat minor submediant. And here, I think so like the little, when Piett's talking, you have the little woodwind thing, and they're holding a note, and then they play a 16th note, and then they go back to holding those notes. And I think it's B flat minor to D minor, which would be the flat submediant to the tonic, and then back to the flat submediant, I believe.
Okay, let's hear that.
Hold on. Let me go to the score.
Yes, Admiral.
Our ships have sighted the Millennium
Like
Falcon.
there?
Falcon Lord, but it has entered an asteroid field and we cannot risk...
Asteroids do not concern me,
Yeah,
Admiral.
The D minor is like very, very quick little 16th note, but it's still that like flat submediant tonic relationship that is the basis of the Imperial March.
Let's see if we can hear it better in the... Is it not in this cue?
It should be.
In Arrival on Dagobah. God, that sounds so much like Rite of Spring. Okay, we're not there yet. It's before that. Wait. Did the harp just do that?
I think so. Wait. Sounded like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It went. No. B flat minor. thing, a B flat minor thing. Oh, but I heard a diminished thing. Wait. Okay. Because it's just seventh. Okay. Did the D minor part already pass? Is it
Yeah,
really
it was
that
like
brief?
just really, really brief 16th note, but it's an interesting kind of reversal of the normal where the in this particular key, the D minor would have gotten the because I think it is in D minor, right? The Imperial March.
You're talking
right
about
before
that.
it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, it's before this. Right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's weird hearing it there and then playing it like on a equal temperament like keyboard. It like sounds so different.
Yeah.
It's technically the same notes, but yeah. So I guess. Yeah. Okay. So, could you want to explain the relationship to the Imperial March?
Oh yeah. So basically, the Imperial March kind of underlying harmony for the first bit of it is in its concert arrangement and in I think the vast majority of its appearances G minor to E flat minor, which would be going down a major third.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's that kind of flat submediant relationship that kind of characterizes the Imperial March in many ways. And this could possibly be related to funeral marches or but that was a mediant relationship. Submediant, same thing, really. The third relationship between chords is what's important. So then to have it here, it's transposed to D minor, but it's D minor to that B flat minor. It's still that like flat submediant relationship, and I think that it's just indicative that all of the material for this particular section of the cue is in some way, shape, or form related back to the Imperial March, whether it's in the harmony in this section or the kind of modified Imperial March ostinato that we talked about a few minutes ago. It's all kind of related.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So just really quick, we're just going to write out some B flat minor chords. Let's just, okay. So triads, at least. Triads. Okay. Basically, I'm just starting on, you can see it's all going up by one step, or, you know, in simple terms. I'm just drawing a snowman slightly higher. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so those are all the diatonic chords okay, anyway, the point is, like, if this is the key we're in, which is B flat minor, did I do that right? I'm kind of half paying attention.
I would say it's in D minor overall.
Oh yeah, sorry, that's right. The B flat is the subunit. Yeah, of course. Okay, start over. Let's go down here. Okay. So that's easier. D minor only has one flat. That is a messed up treble clef. Okay.
Just pull a Beethoven and just write an S.
I could. So D minor has one flat. Okay. So we could start here on D, and then E, F. This is a G minor chord. This is an A minor chord. This is a B flat major chord.
Major.
And this is a, what, C diminished?
Yes.
Wait, 1, 2, 3,
No.
4, 7. C major.
Yeah, C major.
God, you did my music theory card revoked. So when you basically, okay, 1, let's go. See, I'll play it while I do it. Let's do an octave higher. So this is D minor. This is E diminished. This is F major. See how the numbers are ascending? This is G minor. This is A minor. This is B flat major. Some of them are uppercase because, and this is C major. Uppercase means major, lowercase means minor. This little symbol means diminished. The little circle. Okay. So mediant, just when you're talking about submediant, you just mean 6. You just mean taking that. So D minor would be the 1, and the 6 would start on B flat, except instead of doing a B flat major, it's doing a chromatic submediant, so it's going to be a B flat minor. But yeah, mediant, terms like mediant and submediant can be confusing sometimes, but all of these numbers, all of these numbers in functional harmony have a name, and so there's nothing special about it. It's just like one will always, when people talk about tonic, they just mean 1, right? When people talk about 2, they mean supertonic. These are just fancy terms for, 3 is mediant, makes sense. 4 is subdominant. 5 is dominant, although I'm kind of oversimplifying, and also in minor, you tend to, the subdominant is often a major. But anyway, 6 is submediant. And 7 is, again, this doesn't really make sense right here. Let's just, okay, I'm not going to get into it. Okay, I'm not going to get into it. But anyway, mediant just means 3. Submediant means you're taking the 6th. And you can transpose this to any key. So if you start in D, then B flat will be number 6. So if we start in G minor, which the Imperial March, then the submediant, aka number 6, would be E flat, which is why your earlier example was, well, how the Imperial March goes G to G minor to E flat minor. That's the submediant. Anyway, okay, so I am hearing here, you're saying D minor and B flat minor. Okay, that was the explanation for that. That's what a submediant is. Nothing too academic, I guess. Or it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
So
I get a little carried away with Imperial March analysis.
You get carried away with Imperial March analysis?
Yes.
Do you have more to say?
I mean, it's my whole thesis, so...
That's true. Very true.
It's my whole thesis. But, yeah, just kind of that mediant relationship kind of harkens back to the idea that maybe the Imperial March has its origins in funeral marches, which often emphasized the mediant. Again, this is the submediant, but it's still a third between the roots. So there's that. I mean, my whole thesis is arguing that it's not really back to funeral marches. It's back to Elgar and all that British imperialist music. But yeah, just like kind of the way the Imperial March is used. I mean, it's all over the place in this film. But it's so invariant a lot of the times.
Like the theme doesn't really develop much.
The theme doesn't develop. It's often the same harmony. Yeah, often similar or even the same orchestration as well. There is some variance of it in some like minor motifs, minor meaning less important.
Yeah.
Like set piece motifs, particularly Battle of Hoth, where there's some little fragments that are definitely related to the Imperial March, but they're not the Imperial March. And kind of how that's indicative of the rigidity of the Empire as a whole. So even like here, where we're getting some material that's related to the Imperial March, it's related, yes, but it's not actually changed all that much. So you're still getting, even in this reversal of the chords, you're still getting the same two chords, the tonic and the submediant, just they're reversed, and the importance is placed on the submediant rather than the tonic. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. And that makes sense to me too. I think one of the reasons, like I love the Imperial March, but it's never been like my favorite or like the most interesting. Okay. It is interesting, but over time, since it doesn't change much, it is less interesting just for that alone. Just the rigidity of it means that listening to it for, I don't know, like I don't really need to hear it in a ton of context because it's usually kind of the same.
Yeah. Yep.
And that really does feel symbolic of the Empire's rigidity.
Yeah. It really is. And it's probably purposeful on Williams's part to make it not change really at all. I mean, again, you get these little variants, but like they're there for one moment and then they're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the rhythmic motifs are pretty strong with it as well, like the rhythm. And not only that, but like, I don't know, I was talking in an earlier episode about tempo and tempo markings and sort of like for something like the Imperial March or something that's in like tempo alla marcia, something that's in like a march like tempo, it's like often bound by strict percussion and just a strict pacing. You don't really hear like rubato Imperial March.
That would be
So
fun.
now I want to hear it. Next concert arrangement with
right.
That's a next project for Anne Sophie Mutter. An Imperial March violin solo.
It'd be fun.
It would be. Yeah, so interesting. Your thesis, you have 1 semester left. Have you finished writing it?
Yep. I haven't even finished the research yet, but I may have brought like 70 books home with me over break to get through. So
70?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I've gotten through, I'd say, that looks like a solid 30 in my done pile.
So are the books
and
on...
it's been like a week.
What are the books on? Like Elgar, Funeral Marches, John Williams?
So the ones that I've gotten through so far are on various British composers from like mid-19th century to like maybe like 1970s or so, like around the time Williams was composing the score for Empire, because that's when the Imperial March is first used. Then I have some books, kind of background film musicology reading, kind of getting just like a sense of the field and everything. And then I have some on Williams, or, you know, books where there's like one chapter on Williams or one chapter on Star Wars that are in my like next pile to get through, because I was like, you know what, I'm just going to get the British stuff done, because most of that stuff I'm just skimming the books and then putting them aside because they're not actually useful. So I was like, get those 30 books done and then have the rest of break to focus on these other sources. So yeah, I have that to do. I have to finish rewatching Star Wars, and actually taking notes on where and how the Imperial March is used. And then once I have that kind of list, I can then go back and analyze specific moments.
You mean Star Wars the franchise, not Star Wars A New Hope?
Star Wars, yeah,
Star Wars
the
very short
franchise.
list.
Very short list. Unless you count that little Imperial March precursor motif. That's used a couple times, but again, it's not that prominent. Yeah, I'm on the original Clone Wars microseries at the moment in my Star Wars rewatch.
The Tartovsky one? I love that
Yep.
series.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
It's really nice. It's really nice to go back to it. I'm like, I haven't seen this in so long. So, yeah, rewatching that now, then it'll be all the like 2008 and later animated shows.
Hmm.
Most of the live action shows I don't need to rewatch. But yeah, so it's rewatching a whole bunch of Star Wars, reading these like 30 books that I have left to read. And then I can get writing. But I do have like parts of it written already, just that I needed writing sample for PhD applications and all. So
That's cool. You should
Yep.
publish your thesis on like academia or something, so people can read it. Although I don't know I don't know if there's rules about like if it ends up in a future book or something.
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. Follow-up question. You said you were reading a book on like British composers who were contemporary to John Williams. You mean like who were actively composing at the same time as Empire?
A bit, yeah. Like I'm
Okay.
going through like kind of William Walton, and like he's kind of the last composer I'm looking at.
Wait, William Walton was alive then?
Yeah, he was composing into like the at least 50s
What?
or 60s. Yeah,
I forget how much
Let's see.
music in the past like 30 years hasn't. Put it
Yeah,
this
he
way.
died in 1983.
Oh my God. That's a
Yeah,
lot
no,
later than I
it's-
expected.
Yeah. Frank and I did like we like looked up like that Wikipedia like list of composers that has like their dates on it and it,
Yes.
like kind of shows them all in a row. We were like, how many composers were like still alive when Williams was alive? And like I think Debussy was one of them. Like they overlapped
What?
by a few years. Like
Oh
it's
yeah, that makes sense actually because the
crazy.
Impressionists kind of were dying out in the 20s.
Yeah. But like just like some of the composers that were like overlapping with Williams were just like kind of put into perspective. Like, yeah,
My
Williams
mind
is 90 years
blown by
old.
this. My mind is blown by this because like people who are alive, like I'm very fascinated by old people. Well, okay, that sounded really weird. I think like people who are old, who have lived further into the past than I have, they're kind of like a link to this era that is even so in the past that like it's all like, oh, it's in the past. I don't know. It's like in a different brain space almost 'cause it's so in the past.
Yeah.
And then I know John Williams is old, but he's still alive contemporary with us today. Like we will be like we're alive at the same time as John Williams. And to have like someone like Debussy kind of just one generation, like one person removed.
Yeah. Like they
is
never
really
met,
wild.
but like
What was that?
yeah, it's they never would have met. But like
Oh, I know.
it's
Just like
it's crazy.
But
like,
just to have been alive at the same time for some reason, like
Yeah.
also, it doesn't even matter if they haven't met. It's just that someone whom I consider, died so long ago, was like so in the past, actually crossed over with
yeah.
people who are alive. Wow.
Yeah. No, like Walton though, like Williams probably met Walton at one point because when he was doing casting for Fiddler on the Roof, he was involved in that process and they were in London. And
John Williams was involved with casting?
yeah, apparently. This is
What?
from the liner notes from the Fiddler on the Roof, like the anniversary edition CD soundtrack. Frank found this. And he met someone and was like, hey, you want to go to a recording session for Walton's Battle of Britain score? And so we know that Williams was at a recording session for Battle of Britain.
Whoa. Which of
so
course, highly, I mean, I'm sure highly inspired Battle of Yavin.
Yeah, I mean,
or whatever
lot
that
of-
is called.
Walton's music was replaced in the final version of the film.
Oh.
But Williams was there for at least one day of the recording. We don't know what they recorded that day or anything. We don't know if they did actually meet, but Walton was probably there. So yeah, it's just kind of this interesting link between Williams and this British imperialist music, which Walton was definitely involved in those like British imperialist marches, Hungarian style type type of thing. So
Yeah, which you and I have talked about, and I
Yep.
also talked about with Dom Sewell for the Battle of Hoth minutes, and also Dom Sewell, Dominic Sewell. I think he reconstructed William Walton's, what was it? His score for, what's it called? What is the score? What is the score that William Walton did? I can't remember. It has a. I get those British names mixed up.
there's a lot of
Yeah, King.
he did a lot of scores.
Yeah,
Um,
Walton's Henry V.
Henry V.
That's what it was. And someone on Discord actually asked me, based on that episode, I think Alex Cunningham, if you're listening to this, I'm pulling up Discord right now because he said, like, was there a bias toward, oh yeah, okay. Walton shoutouts, because we mentioned Walton, of course. Very interesting. Was there a bias toward referencing British composers in this episode, or am I just making an assumption? And my response was like, maybe there was a bias, but like also maybe William really did pull from a lot of British composers. Like, so Elgar and Walton are just,
yeah.
like, I
mean,
feel like they're
he-
not they maybe were cherry picking a little bit, but also I think that's definitely really there a lot.
I mean, Williams, I need to find the actual interviews, but like he does, it's kind of just a thing that people say now. It's like, oh, Williams is an Anglophile, like he loves that British music. He specifically cites Elgar in the throne room of A New Hope.
Yes.
That's like a very specific reference where he does admit there's some inspiration there. But beyond that, I haven't really found any direct Williams references to the British imperialist music. But like, it's kind of, I mean, even John Powell, when talking about creating that major mode Imperial March that we talked about the first time I was on the show, yes, the pomp and circumstance. But he, like, even Powell specifically says, we know Williams loves Elgar in an interview talking about that Imperial March version. So it's kind of just something that is assumed now, but finding actual evidence of Williams saying, oh, I love this music is hard to find, but I'm on the search.
Yeah. That's awesome. I guess the reason I asked you about that is because I feel like anyone, I guess, who is writing music is inspired by the music that they played and studied growing up. And
Oh, for sure.
I'm not saying that they're not also inspired by contemporaries or people who are like brand new music coming out, but I think what we know from childhood is like wired in a different way, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say there's like, I don't want to say that there's less of that, but I think like not in the film scoring world, in the non-film scoring, quote unquote, classical concert music world, like the people that we would usually put people like Elgar and Walton and Debussy and Tchaikovsky and those people into, you know, I feel like the education goes up to a certain decade, maybe. It goes to a certain point, like probably at the end of Walton, maybe, and doesn't tend to go very much further, unless it's just like yeah, I definitely learned about 20th century composers. 20th century could mean 1900 though, like 1920, which is still a long time ago. And we may have had like a week on like John Adams and, you know, some more 50, 60 years. But yeah, I guess someone like John Williams would have been even closer in time to some of the people that he was inspired by. Anyway, I don't really have a point to that. It's just, it's more of a commentary on like the way that I think maybe the film scoring world or like film media in general, I think maybe that took over as the I don't know, as the classical adjacent genre that is paid attention to.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, like, kind of going off of that, I mean, well, first of all, like, definitely childhood influences. That's why we get so many, like, complicated jazz chords in Williams, is because he was kind of very much, his father was a jazz musician, he was a jazz musician, so, like, that kind of, that vocabulary is just ingrained at this point. But I think the other thing we have to contend with film music specifically sounding like other composers is the whole temp tracking thing.
Yeah, true.
So, like, from what I've heard, a lot of Empire was temp tracked to, like, Bartok, actually.
Makes perfect sense.
Which makes sense when you listen to it. Like, it sounds like Bartok at a lot of moments. So there's kind of that, like, the question of, like, how much of the sound alikes in film music specifically are because it's part of that composer's vocabulary based on music they listened to growing up, or even music they listen to now, and how much of it is, it needs to sound like this temp track that is that particular composer. So I think there's less British music temp tracking, I would assume, in Star Wars generally. I think that does come specifically from Williams. Because like the whole throne room sequence in A New Hope was temp tracked to Dvorak 9, I think, the final movement.
I see.
Say. So like there's no Elgar there, but Williams threw some Elgar in. Yeah, so I think
doesn't sound like Dvorak 9.
No, I might not have been Dvorak 9. It definitely wasn't British. I'm totally blanking on what it was. I used to know what it was, but it's definitely not British. And Williams threw that in. So I think a lot of the British influences is just because he loves that music, and it's kind of just become part of his vocabulary and his composing.
Yes, I agree. And I think maybe, I don't know, I would love to, I'm just so curious to see like an editor's cut, like a first edit cut with the temp track. Would be very fascinated to see that.
Yeah. I've seen like scenes of that.
Really?
Yeah, because we had, totally blanking on his name. Was it Paul Hirsch?
That sounds about right. Paul Hirsch.
Yeah, he was the
editors. What did
yeah, he was the
editor,
keynote. Right? Yeah, he was the keynote speaker for Music in the Moving Image last year, or this year, technically still 2022, but in May, he was the keynote, and he did show some scenes. I think it was all from A New Hope, if I remember correctly, with the original temp score, and then what Williams wrote. And, like, kind of some of the scenes where he was, like, really going with the same, like, the Dune Sea of Tatooine and the Stravinsky Rite of Spring. Like, where those scenes where he's very much following the temp score, but then there are also some other scenes where he kind of departs from the temp score that Hirsch was also demonstrating. So it was really cool.
Wow, that's cool. And also Paul Hirsch, Richard Chew, and Marsha Lucas won the Oscar for editing for Star Wars in '78. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say after that, but anyway, I think that was a good tangent. Yeah, there's lots of Walton-esque, Elgar-esque stuff, and I don't know. I'm interested to hear. I'm interested to read your. I keep pressuring you to share your thesis that you haven't even written yet. your thesis about how that is more related to how the Imperial March is more related to that than the funeral marches. Let me just jog everyone's memory. I played this during episode 5 of the show, but I'm just going to play a bit from Chopin's Funeral March, which has similarity to the Imperial March. There's a little bit of blank space at the beginning of the recording. Here we go. The part where it goes up as well. So yeah, I mean, one could make a connection between that. And what you're going to do is not debunk that, but just say that that's like a less important connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like saying like, yes, funeral marches do explain some of the aspects of the Imperial March, but they're not sufficient for fully explaining, where this march came from. And then for that, you have to look at these other influences. And I mean, there's actually the second movement of Elgar's First Symphony. There's a march theme in there that sounds quite reminiscent of the Imperial March, actually. So.
First movement?
Yeah. Second movement.
Second movement? Okay. I'll put that in the show
it's
notes.
Like maybe 30 seconds to a minute into the movement, but like it has quite a few similarities that.
Oh, interesting.
Especially orchestrationally, that kind of are like,
Okay. Well,
But yeah.
You've piqued my interest. How far into it is it? Just out of curiosity, just if let's say I were pulling it up on YouTube right now.
So it's like, I'd say maybe a minute or so into the second movement.
Okay.
Like, it's not exact, but...
Yeah. The vibe. Oh, interesting. This sounds like Schubert a little bit.
It kind of does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is
But it
cool. I
kinda goes
definitely
off
want to
from
listen to
there.
more of this later, but interesting. Okay, now that I've heard that, I am also hearing a little bit of of Dvorak, so I can kind of anyway. But I think the funeral nature of the funeral march. I mean, the Imperial March is not related to. It's not sad. It's not funeral.
Yeah.
It's more grotesque and controlling than like sad.
Yeah, it kind of like another possible reference that I think people bring up relatively frequently is like kind of like Russian, like Soviet era Russian marches that are kind of sardonic, and very chromatic and all of that. And like that's definitely, I think, another reference that Williams is making.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's see. Where were we? We're at the end of the minutes. And I have some sound design stuff to share about Dagobah. But let me just see if... one last thing about the minutes is this like little trombone, the horns and trombones getting the last word at the end. I just like that part, so I'm going to play it. And it's those emphatic quarter notes. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Falcon Lord, but it has entered an asteroid field and we cannot risk...
Asteroids do not concern me, Admiral. I want that ship, not excuses.
Yes, Lord.
Just right there. D,
Yep.
D, 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 D. Okay.
Kind of
Last
this
word.
very like oppressive, heavy.
Oppressive is a good word.
Brass. Yeah.
Yeah, the Imperial March is less, it's not sad, it's oppressive.
It's oppressive.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Ben Burtt on Dagobah. So in various interviews, he has shared a lot about Dagobah. So one of the things he says is a lot of the thunder that is part of the atmosphere on Dagobah was purchased from a man named Tad Staples, who had devoted his life to recording thunder. I'm quoting from an interview now. Tad is blind and spends almost all of his time in a world in which sound means everything to him. He grew up in the Midwest where there were thunderstorms. Ben Burtt saw an interview with him on the Today Show because he's quite knowledgeable about the sound of thunder, having recorded so many storms. So he got in touch with him, invited him out to California. They obtained many of his thunder recordings, which they used over the years for thunder in these films.
Interesting.
That's really funny to me. I don't like, they purchased it from a man named Tad Staples. And then he also says, Dagobah is a great opportunity for a sound designer because you can create an unseen world that's off camera. You can give it a vastness that's not really there. I started out with some recordings of birds in a zoo, but they were in a very echoey aviary. So when you slowed down the recording of the echoey birds, they became spooky howls, which really had the right feel, which we can really hear. But mixing in with that were a lot of other little animals. We had some recordings done of raccoons that are in a bathtub in order to confine them so they wouldn't run away from the microphone. Oh my God. Can you imagine putting raccoons in your bathtub? I think the fact that they got like recordings in an echoey aviary perhaps explains why Dagobah has this echoey sound to it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they took that recording and like just worked with it. And I feel like, because I've been thinking, why would a swamp be echoey? Just this whole time, like where is the sound bouncing off of? Where are the reflections? Like, I've just been wondering about that.
Yeah, you'd think like with all the like fog around, it would kind of absorb the sound a little bit.
Yeah,
but
I would think.
Star Wars physics aren't the same as Earth physics, so maybe in Star Wars the fog makes it echoey.
Well, and maybe there's like some hard surfaces. Maybe there's like a rock formation somewhere. We just can't see it through the fog. But maybe they're surrounded by rocks. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's interesting that they literally had echoey birds that became spooky owls. And then he says I have one more quote, which is, although there's plenty of busy moments in the Star Wars movies with lots of explosions and gunfire, and that those sequences have their own, meaning, quite often those sequences are just ambiance. Creating a place with sound can be more satisfying because you're able to really kind of give it a character, much in the same way that music can color a scene one way or the other. It can be made sad or it can be made spooky by the use of music. Likewise, the sound effects themselves can be used to create an ambience which functions emotionally much the same way. And of course, in a Star Wars movie, you're free to create off-screen noises which are unearthly. You're not bound by the expectations to people, we're going to hear familiar birds and insects, but rather you can create a whole world of unseen creatures with sound, which can be utilized to give it an emotional undercurrent, which otherwise wouldn't have. So, I mean, these are from multiple interviews, so there's, a bit of repetition, but he keeps saying the unseen world.
Yeah.
Which I think is extremely present on Dagobah.
Oh, for sure.
Which makes it very mysterious because you're like, what else is here? It also reminds me of Alice in Wonderland. Like when there's all those, I don't know. Have you seen Alice in Wonderland?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So like, and I've been on the ride at Disneyland. So that's probably why I remember it. There's all these little like animals and like hooting owls and like even the flowers I think are talking and stuff. Like it's just a very loud forest.
Yeah.
Okay. So the cues from this set of minutes were the end of the Asteroid Field, which is 4M3, and then all of Crash Landing, which is 5M1. The musical themes are the Han and Leia A section, the Semitonal Slip incidental motif, the main theme A section. Of course, it was like in minor, but still counts. Droids, which was probably had the most appearances.
Yeah, for sure.
And the Imperial March, the main theme. And then in the soundtrack, this is the end of the Asteroid Field and the track Arrival on Dagobah. I don't think I missed anything. I think that's about it.
I think that's it.
Yeah. Is there anything about this set of minutes from your 10 pages of notes that you didn't get to discuss?
I think we covered pretty much all of it. It was mostly just me going off on instrumentation. So, but we kind of covered that as we were going through.
Do you have any, like, to sum up your thoughts on the instrumentation? What stands out to you
Yeah.
about these minutes?
So kind of like, I'm kind of think of these 5 minutes in like kind of 4 sections. So you have like the end of the Asteroid Field sequence, which is very much, you know, kind of typical Williams thematic, even if those themes are like just incidental set piece motifs. Tonal, texturally, timbrally, typical Williams or full orchestra, all of that, lots of Piccolo. Then there's like the little 45 seconds of no music. Then there's the Dagobah portion, which is very kind of atonal, experimental, where kind of other than the droid theme, the main interest is really in the changing textures and timbres, and kind of how Williams kind of creates a very unique musical sound world for a planet that also has a very unique sound world generally, just in the sound effects. It ends up fitting really well. And then the Imperial March section in the Star Destroyer at the end. And again, that's like very typical Williams. So like it's kind of these like typical Williams moments that are kind of sandwiching this very experimental moment that we don't hear too much of in Star Wars, even if Williams does know how to do that and proves it in a lot of his like concert works and stuff.
Well recapped. Cool. Well, are you ready to move on to the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire? This will be your 3rd time.
Yep. Let's do it.
Okay. In exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
This is kind of, I don't know, changed a lot. I don't remember what I said the first
And I won't tell you
2
until
times,
after.
but I definitely say like texture is a big one. And I don't know if this is just, again, because I've been doing a lot of work in timbre and instrumentation recently, but like that's kind of the thing that in rewatching Star Wars for my thesis that has popped out a lot, is just changing textures, timbres, all that. So texture, I'd say motion too, especially the original trilogy where you have these like big expansive rubato moments that you get less frequently in the other 2 trilogies, but they're still there. And then third word, I'd say thematic, because a lot of it is like, that's the memorable bits. I mean, if Frank can make an entire, but will at some point in the near future be an over 100 page catalog of the thematic material, I feel like thematic is a good one.
Oh my god. So texture, motion, thematic. Okay, what you previously said was powerful, evocative, grandiose. So you kind of went in a different direction.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about?
Kind of, I think, I'm pretty sure I said like the like interviews with musicians, learning more about them, and I'd agree with that. But I'd also add just kind of learning more about the behind the scenes people in general, not just the musicians, but the recording engineers, the music editors, even like to the point of like the librarians of the orchestra, the contractors.
Believe it or not, you're the 2nd person this season who has mentioned the librarians.
Really?
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. But yeah, I have kind of a long-term project planned of creating a database of just everyone who's worked on Star Wars music and having it searchable by film, by position, title, by name, and then eventually maybe having like links to interviews, or even doing interviews myself for those who don't have interviews, little bios, just to like learn about these people who, because like we all know John Williams, but like he's not the only person involved in music. Like it takes a village to create a film score. And I think learning more about like the behind the scenes stories would be interesting.
I'm I agree so much. And in my own notes, I've been sort of trying to catalog these people just for my own purposes. So if I don't know, maybe I can help you out if you ever need help or whatever, because I would like that resource. I would personally like to have that resource, and also for it to just be in the world, especially as kind of sort of more of the generation of people who worked on Star Wars. I don't know. Some of them might not be around, and some of them aren't around anymore. That's really cool. Your previous answer was musician stories from recording the sequel films, particularly The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
You said
still interested in that.
Yeah, I'm still interested in that too. And for Rise of Skywalker season, which is next for me, I will definitely be hitting up people who played in The Rise of Skywalker, because
yes, please.
they're I'm pretty sure they're all alive. Yeah. And okay, final question is, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
So many. I mean, right now it's been Shape of Water has been on repeat because I just wrote a paper on it. So I'd say Shape of Water.
That's funny. That was also your answer.
It's a good score.
For Solo season.
And it's like getting to know it even better now through like writing a whole paper on it. It's an even better score than I thought it was. So
it's always nice when that happens.
Yeah.
And then the other answer that you have given was Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, that one is good too.
Well, awesome. I know since the last time we chatted, you now have a YouTube channel, and your talk that you gave, what was it at the moving, I can't remember.
Music in the Moving, Music in the Moving Image,
Your talk is online, so yeah. Why don't you, it was on the Imperial March diegesis. Diegeticization in Solo and in Rebels, right? Yeah. So I'll
that was with Frank Lehman.
Yeah, you gave that talk. Yeah. So listeners, you might be interested in that. And then I'll also put links to our previous episodes where for Solo season, we talked about the Imperial March in Solo quite in depth. So for sure, I will put links to all your stuff. Is there anywhere else? I know you were working on a website. I don't know if that was done.
That's still in process.
Okay, that's fine. At least you have a YouTube channel. And cool. Well, thank you so much for coming back on this show.
Yeah,
Sam.
thank you for having me. It's always fun.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk to you about stuff too. Empire Strikes Back is very exciting. And now we're on Dagobah. So like we kind of this is new terrain, literally new terrain. So look forward to more of that in the coming weeks. Listeners, you can let me know what you think about any of the questions that we posed today. You can let me know on social media at Star Wars Music Minute on most of the platforms, except on Twitter, it's at Star Wars Muse Min. And I mean, I don't know how long Twitter will be around, but I'm personally on Mastodon and Hive and everything as well at Chrysanthi10, but I don't really go on there yet that much. And yeah, okay, next week we'll be back to talk about minutes 46 through 50 of The Empire Strikes Back. May the Force be with you, and thanks for listening to Star Wars Music Minute.